What's up? What's up? What's up, man? We appreciate y'all for checking in to the G Spot podcast. If you haven't already, make sure y'all download the RWR Live 365 app where you can listen to this show and plenty of other good shows and good music all throughout the day, man. If you like jazz, R&B, blues, we got all that good stuff. We playing 24/7 on the RWR Live 365 app. Um, Today, man, I got a new one, a new guest to the G Spot podcast, new to the studio. We got Abraham Scully with a Storytelling Solutions of America, man. How you doing this evening?
I am well. I'm blessed, highly favored. I'm excited to be here.
Hey, I appreciate you for coming in, checking in with us. Um, First of all, man, I hope y'all being safe out there. We got some crazy weather going on in the city right now. So I definitely hope that y'all being safe out there. If y'all haven't already too, the event that we got coming up, make sure y'all check out the Retro Sunday starting uh July 21st at 1216 North Pensacola. I don't know if y'all know Tracy Gunn, Tommy Gunn, and Miss Tracy Gunn, the same people, husband and wife. They got the event coming up. We got DJ Hell. If you know DJ Hell, gonna be in the room. You already know it's gonna be some good stuff. Tickets $15, and we got our boy Preach and Sade Carl who will be there hosting. So make sure y'all check that out. Starting July 21st. One thing I can say when it comes to the entertainment in the city. Hey, we've been doing pretty good. Shout out to the Club 850, the 850 Event Center. My bad, we ain't gonna call it the club, the 850 Event Center. Make sure y'all check that out too, man. They have some pretty good events going on. Also, what we got here? We got the Family Fun Learning and Engagement coming up. Make sure y'all check that out too for the Parent University of Pensacola. Um, And we got a lot of good things coming up. Make sure y'all check out the G Spot podcast page if y'all haven't already followed. We got some stuff coming up on there too. And too, and if y'all guess if y'all need the information on there, make sure y'all hit us up. We'll definitely hit you right back. Um, so we got the Storytelling Solutions of America, man. Abraham, tell us about the program.
Absolutely. So, Storytelling Solutions of America, we also go by SSA. Is it cutting up on you? We also go by SSA. So I'll kind of go back and forth between Storytelling Solutions of America and SSA.
Mhm.
But basically, we are a local 501c3 nonprofit organization, and we exist to be a launching pad teaching youth to own their stories and access mental health care through the art and skill of public speaking. So we have a series of programs that we run in support of youth mental health, teaching them life skills, how to communicate themselves for themselves, and how to advocate for resources.
Mhm.
So it's exciting. It's an exciting time. I mean, unfortunately, mental health, the state that we're in right now around youth mental health is tough. People are dying due to mental health related issues. People are suffering in silence, and so we just want to be a resource to the youth in our community.
It's definitely needed, as we have all seen when it comes to the crime rate in our communities. A lot of times, I had a conversation last week with somebody, and they were saying something about you can't tell these kids nothing. They don't want to go to church no more. They don't want to do this. They want to do that. And it's it's more than going to church. It's more than going to church. And the thing is, though, if we give up on our own people, if we give up on the youth, then what do they have? And what do you expect from them? You know, if everybody's giving up on them. I know me when I decided to get into psychology, that was my main purpose is how could I get into the schools and minority schools especially to talk to these kids. A lot of times, from especially me knowing so many educators, I hear them complain a lot about how a lot of the minority children, I hate the word minority, but we're going to use it for everybody else to understand. Um, a lot of minority children are treated a certain type of way, regardless if they have the same actions as other children. Sometimes, though, we don't sit down and we don't ask questions. You know, we don't ask them. Instead of, we feel like, well, let me go ahead and whoop you, or let me go ahead and do you like this. Because you should know better. But sometimes we have to ask them, you know, because we just sometimes kids be hungry. Sometimes, you know, growing up, we kind of most of us grew up with parents where I don't know if y'all saw the meme on social media back when they used to say, I told my mom I was stressed out or depressed, and she said, "Go depress them damn dishes."
Yeah,
You know what I'm saying?
That's a fact.
Yeah, that's a fact. But we laugh at that, but that's sad.
It is.
You know,
We don't learn how to feel those feelings.
Mhm.
And so we don't learn how to put a name to what those things are and how to articulate it.
Mhm.
And so if you don't know how to do that, you're going to suppress all of it.
Mhm.
And there are consequences to suppressing your
Yes.
feelings and emotions. Like
Mhm.
you're going to reap the consequences to that, whether it is immediately or down the road when you become a young adult
Mhm.
or you become married, for those who decide to get married, when you become a parent, because you suppressed those feelings of depression, betrayal, being upset, sadness, all of those things is going to show up in your adult life.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, you talk about minority students and children. We don't have the opportunity to develop those skills. And so typically we're the ones who suppress those things for such a long time, and then it comes out
Yeah.
in these negative ways.
Yeah. I was having a conversation with my dad earlier. He pointed out some things that it was crazy. I was just talking about. He asked my nephew a question. If he asked him, would you want that land over there, or would you want $100? And my nephew said $100. He's 7. He said $100. He said, well, why would you not want the land? Because the land is more valuable than $100.
Mm-hmm.
And my nephew started to cry. And he was like, why are you crying?
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, but a lot of times us as men, even as children, when you teach children, it's a lot of yelling, going back and forth.
Yeah.
We see the joke all the time. If Andy got 4 apples, and after a while, the second one, if Andy got 4 damn apples, you know what I'm saying? We don't understand what's that's doing to the child.
Yeah.
So for a lot of, especially men, a lot of boys, we were taught that a lot of times that when people communicated with us because of who they felt we should be, they communicated with us in the wrong way. And so it was no reason for my nephew to cry, but he doesn't know no other way to communicate, because he was taught, well, if I get this wrong, this is what's going to happen to me.
Mm-hmm.
So as an adult, for a lot of us men, we get to a point where we're not able to vocalize how we feel or who we are unless it's anger involved.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of times they would relate that to us, was black men, we this, we that, but we don't get those spaces. And then not even, a lot of times we'll try to blame it on other people. We point the fingers at other
Mm-hmm.
people. But a lot of times it comes from people in our own community.
Yeah.
In the grooming of our own community, to where as individuals, and it's just not a man thing. We see it with a lot of children, is period, men and female and male. It's just mishandling children and letting them be able to voice how they feel, why they feel the way that they feel.
Mm-hmm.
I remember my sister, she would get mad at my nephew and she'd call me and be like, I need you to do XYZ. I need you to come get him. Because sometimes it's different when a man chastises a child compared to a woman. But me, I wouldn't whip my nephew. I would ask him, well, why did you feel the need to do XYZ? And sometimes it'd be just as simple. I just didn't feel like doing it that day. Why don't you feel like doing it?
Yeah.
And then I would tell him, well, you should do this because this reason. Now that I know that, now the consequences might be different, because I just don't believe in holding someone accountable for things that they don't know.
Yeah.
And I even feel biblically, for a lot of us who refer back to the Bible for a lot of things that we do in our lifestyle, that's not even the way to live biblically. You know what I'm saying? God is not going to fault you for what you don't know.
Yeah.
So why are we doing it to people?
Wow.
And a lot of times like I said, we underestimate. I remember having a conversation with a woman, and she said, that's what's wrong with these damn kids now. They've got too much privilege. You don't tell me how you feel. Well, why not? Why not? And you know what? A lot of times I look at the black household, and it kind of reminds you a lot of slavery. You know what I'm saying?
You said it.
Yeah. It reminds you a lot of that.
It's
not being able to move how you want to move, not saying that you want to move disrespectfully, but it's a certain type of way that you have to be because of respect. And sometimes we have to grasp the fact that tradition does not mean holding on to tradition. It's not progression all the time.
No, tradition has its place, but I think at the end of the day, the question should be, are we growing? Like you said, are we progressing?
Mm-hmm.
If we're going backwards or we're staying in the same place, maybe it's time to look at what we've been doing and see where we need to make adjustments. And I think because what we have been doing is easy and it's comfortable, we don't typically do things that are different. And fortunately, in the work that I do, I get to see how people operate from different walks of life, right? And you're 100% right. In Black households, typically there is one way to address feelings, emotions. Like there are no questions, right? You don't have feelings. You feel what I tell you, you feel, and you do what I tell you to do. But when you think and look at other households, and it doesn't even have to be, Black or white thing. It can be cultural thing. Like I grew up in a Jamaican household. Like both my parents Jamaican immigrants. And I love my parents to this day. And I've learned so much from being raised by them. But there are certain things culturally that we just do in this household, whether it works or not, because that's what they did and that's what their parents did. So when we look at, culturally and all the different ways that make us unique as people, there are certain people who actually have conversations with their kids. Oh, yeah. They ask them questions and they get answers, and those kids know how to navigate their emotions. So, right, if I see that as a person who is leading a household where my children don't know how to articulate themselves, they don't know how to express themselves and feel their feelings, maybe I should look at the way this person is doing it and pull, a couple lessons from here and apply it here. But I think because of the ease of the way things have been, we've been doing it, what's comfortable and what's challenging, we kind of stay in the same spot. Because I mean, when you teach a young person how to articulate themselves, now you're required to have much higher level conversations as a parent, right? And that's scary for certain parents. Yeah. So I would much rather you just listen to what I'm saying and we not having to, have this dialogue than to have a conversation when I have to go do things. There are other things that are more important than explaining to you why I'm saying this thing is important.
And that's so messed up. That I remember, but it's the reality of things. And I remember hearing it. I think with a lot of parents, when you make them question themselves, they don't know how to react to that. And I remember a story. My dad, like most Black grandmas, used to have the Last Supper picture in the living room, and my dad asked my great grandma, "Why ain't no Black people in that picture?" And my great grandma didn't say nothing. Right? She didn't say nothing. He was laying on the floor watching TV, and so my grandma walked in the room, walked back in the living room, and started hitting him with a belt, and said, "Don't you ever question God." But I'm like, he was like, really? Now as an adult, I don't think she was mad that I had the question with God. It made her even think, well, why ain't no Black people up in there? You know what I'm saying? And for a lot of times, though, when you come to parents who are still kind of set up in those and it's not even just parents. You could go to somebody that stay down the street from you that you just know that's influential to your family, a family friend, and you make them question their morals and their traditions of growing up. You might not get the best reaction sometimes because they don't know the answer to it. Well, maybe, you know what I'm saying? Well, this is just the way that we always done it, but that doesn't make it right. Especially like you said, we're not seeing the progression in our communities. We're not seeing it, especially now, you know what I'm saying? Okay, so what are we going to do about it? I think, and I say this a lot now, me going into the military, I remember growing up, my grandparents from Alabama. There was a lot of stuff that we heard about Alabama. And when I ended up being stationed in Alabama, I hated it. I hated it because of the history that I was told, and my grandparents were still living, and so I had to go through my own experience being in the military, because a lot of stuff that you go through, I'll never forget, man. Like going to chow and it's like, we ain't got no watermelon, we ain't got no chicken. And you being young, you're not really, because how I grew up, my grandparents were from Alabama. We heard certain things, but they never told us not to like people. You know what I'm saying? So when we used to hear it, he used to be like, okay, well, I know it's messed up, but how messed up is it? Now being an adult and me knowing the stuff that I know in the history of certain things, I'm trying now, you know what I'm saying? But I think it definitely showed me, it made me feel some type of way about a certain culture of people, but then I couldn't just blame it on everybody else when I started seeing the certain things that we circulate in our own communities, the type of music we listen to, and we manifest that type of music into our own communities. So where now it's just kind of like, okay, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do about us? You'll see a lot of times, and I'm not knocking nobody for, if you support what's going on in Israel and Palestine, I get it 100%. But what about what's going on in our own homes? What about the mental health of our own people? A lot of times we inherit things from people that we never even got a chance to meet, and we have to be honest about therapy, the importance of therapy. Even when you think you all right, you probably need to go sit and talk to somebody, due to the fact that majority of us grew up in households where we couldn't talk about it. Even me, when I talked about doing the Let's Talk About Sex discussion, that came from me just having a conversation with someone about their issues, and it started making me realize things about myself. You know what I'm saying? And I'm just like, oh man, like, well, that's why I have a problem with this, is because as a child, I went through this. But if we don't have the conversations, we'll never pin it out. And you would say, well, this is just who I am. Yeah. You know what I'm saying? But what you gonna do about it? You know what I'm saying?
You said a couple of things that I want to highlight. Accountability.
Oh yeah.
And I think the other thing is the desire for growth, because you can't force someone to want to grow. They have to have that desire. And then when they have the desire, they have to take full accountability for themselves until they change, or forever, take full accountability. But it requires full accountability of themselves to then change, and for them to be open to doing different things. Like for someone like you, and we're just now talking, but I can tell like you are a type of person that if you see something that maybe you're missing out on because of lack of information or lack of exposure, that is enough motivation for you to play around in that area so that you can grow and you can get what you don't have. But not everyone has that desire for growth. And it goes back to being comfortable. And then you have to get, comfortable being uncomfortable with the people who you were originally comfortable with. Because when you start to do things differently, then that's going to make other people uncomfortable. And you have to learn how to be comfortable with that. Right. So I think there's a lot of pieces to why our communities look the way it looks, but I think it requires people like, people who are hungry for growth and hungry for excellence, hungry for the development of our culture and our community. Because when people see that, then they can attract themselves to that and say, oh, I didn't know that I can desire that thing too.
Yeah.
I didn't know that I didn't have to settle for eating this way that I've always been eating, or going to this type of, whatever this thing is that I've always been doing. I didn't know that we can do those things.
Yeah.
So I think it requires, for people like that to be loud about their desire for growth, and their willingness to take accountability. And people like that. Yeah. It's harder to choose that route if you don't see it. And it's easier to build community when you see it and you can approach that person and say, I'm seeing you moving a certain way, and I've never seen that before. I'd like to learn. I'd like to be able to be exposed to that too.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I know it all goes by, like you said, when you have to get comfortable with being uncomfortable. With growth, growth is uncomfortable, period. I think a lot of times for us as a culture of people, my daddy used to say this all the time growing up, and I see it more that I get older, is that we hold on to a lot of dead stuff. And sometimes we get to a point where we know it's time for change, but we still holding on to that friend, that relationship, that job that we know that we got to let go in order to move to the next level. But we get so scared, we keep on holding on to it, and we never get to be exposed to growth. One thing I had to learn, even this past relationships, is that ending a situation does not mean that either one of y'all are bad people. You know what I'm saying? Doesn't mean that it was a terrible situation. But with growth, it requires you to adjust to that new lifestyle, and that could be without that situation.
Yeah.
And that's okay,
Yeah.
because obviously something better is coming. We be sometimes so focused on what can go wrong, we forget about what could go right.
Oh man.
You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that's one thing I have been having to teach myself, you know, and just like I said, having these conversations the past 2 years, being open, because I was even now I'm still working on communication.
Yeah.
I used to suck at communication, you know what I'm saying? Because I didn't know how to do it unless I was mad about something. But just sitting down now and actually thinking out my actions, actually thinking about my decisions before I actually make them, it helped me a lot, you know. And two, one thing I do is, even with dealing with other people, even when people cross me, I try not to take it as personal, because sometimes it ain't even about you. You know what I'm saying? And I try not to take it as personal too, because I try to put myself in their shoes to see what did I say, what did I do to make you feel the way that you felt, to react the way that you did. Because sometimes it's just miscommunication.
Mhm.
You know, so sometimes you might come off a certain type of way regardless of your intention.
Mhm.
You know, and the person might take it a certain type of way, but that all goes back into how people are handled mentally. You know what I'm saying? People past traumas. Like I said, sometimes even with dealing with trauma, family trauma that you just inherit from your mama, your grandma,
Mhm.
your dad, your granddad, you know, especially when it comes to men. A lot of Black men, we always grew up in a setting where all you do is work, work, work. You ain't no man unless you work. You know what I'm saying? Sometimes you get in relationships, you feel like that's all I got to do. I got to work, work, work. And you wonder why men die before women. You know what I'm saying? You haven't even got to enjoy your life because you have been taught to be a machine the rest of your life. Don't pursue your dreams. It's all about working, supplying for your family. And it's different ways. It's like what the old people say is more than one way to skin a cat.
Yeah.
You know, but that goes into, you know, you have to have these conversations. You have to be open and be real with yourself, even about yourself. Accountability. I talk about that on my show all the time. It's accountability. And that's another thing where a lot of people now, you know, use terminology of shadow work. Shadow work is something that's a lifelong thing. It's never open. But with shadow work, accountability, you know, of being open to being real about the things that you allowed to happen to yourself, the things that you allowed to happen to you, you know. But it definitely starts with the conversations and creating the rooms to be comfortable to have these conversations, man. So what motivated you to get into this type of work?
Yeah. So honestly, I wouldn't be talking about mental health if I didn't have my own struggles. And I like to start with that because going back to our communities,
Mhm.
right? How many of us are exposed to the opportunity to get into this field, right? You mentioned psychology earlier, and there is a very low percentage of Black African American mental health professionals.
Mhm.
I don't know if that's intentional. I'm not going to go as far as to say that is that way, but we're not necessarily exposed to that
Mm.
to be able to take that route. But I got into the work because of my own experience with depression. So I grew up in Miami, was raised by Jamaican parents, and then I was the first in my family to go to college. So 2014, I graduated from high school, jumped on a plane, landed in Pensacola, went to the University of West Florida. And so I was there, and that's where I graduated with my degree in psychology. But I even chose the path of psychology because I was struggling with depression that first year.
Mm.
And I didn't know it was depression. All I knew was I wasn't motivated anymore. I
Mm.
wasn't getting out of bed. I'm having these, negative thoughts that I can't slow down. Like I was just isolating myself. I just knew I wasn't myself, but I didn't have the language or education to know it could possibly be something mental health related.
Yeah.
So long story short, I had a good friend of mine that first year at UWF, and she saw the shift happen. She saw I went from being this very outgoing, always at all the campus events to not being there, right? Being more closed off, more, withdrawn, things like that. She reached out and she basically said, "This is what I'm seeing. What's going on?" So I trusted her enough to really open up with her. And I told her all of what I was experiencing. And she was the person who gave it a name. She said, "It sounds like you depressed." It's like, nah, ain't no way I'm depressed. Like I'm a optimistic guy. I work out, I've been through difficult things in my life. I can't be depressed.
Yeah.
All right. People like me don't get depressed.
Yeah.
She's like, "Bro, everything that you just described, it sounds like depression."
Yeah.
And if you are depressed, there's a counseling center. You can get help. You can figure this out, with support. So I ended up listening to her. I went to the counseling center and I spoke to a mental health professional for the first time in my life. And I did the assessment that they have you do. I spoke with the psychiatrist. And not long after that, I ended up being diagnosed with major depressive disorder. And then not long after the diagnosis, I started in treatment for depression. So with that new information, it was like bittersweet for me because I was like, how did I get depressed? How did somebody like me, now being diagnosed with depression? But then the other part was that I had a name for this thing that I was feeling, because before that, I thought I was just losing my mind. I thought I was going crazy. I was like, well, I just got to accept that I'm going crazy. And this is my new reality. But that wasn't the situation, because this mental health professional was saying, this is exactly what depression looks like.
Yeah.
This is what we can do about it. So, I happened to have that experience and started in treatment and recovery. And then I just started having just side conversations with people at school and in my family, just sharing, bits and pieces of what I was experiencing. And I started to realize a lot of us was going through the same things and nobody was talking about it. So I said, this ends here, right? I'm going to be the one to talk about it. So I just started sharing my story and my experience in hopes that it would inspire somebody. Maybe it would encourage somebody who needed to get help, like I was getting help, for them to actually get into the building because they see somebody like myself who they wouldn't typically think is depressed, and I started doing that. And then that kind of, built up to me being able to start a business and then work with different organizations. And then now we have a nonprofit that I launched with a few other people in 2022. And so now we're essentially connecting youth to mental health resources, but equipping them with public speaking skills. So the same thing that I lacked, and like you're saying, a lot of people lack with being able to communicate what they're experiencing, what they're feeling, to even get the help that they need. We're teaching these teenagers how to do so effectively, and then giving them platforms to share their story. So on one of those platforms, we have our annual Inspired Mind Summit, where we are training teenagers who we call them youth storytellers, and they're going to be speaking at the summit, doing keynote presentations, sharing their stories in front of 200 of their peers. So it's like different experiences where it's like, wow, we never had the opportunity to learn how to feel our feelings, express ourselves, let alone communicate that. And so why not teach them at a young age how to do these things, and then give them the platform to show them, hey, you can inspire other young people like yourself, and we can build community around this thing.
That's very, very important. It's funny that you pointed it out when it comes to depression. When we see it on other people, we feel like that's the only way to be depressed. I ain't going through that. That ain't me. But that's how I identified it with myself. Was I started to realize, oh, well, I'm usually a people's person, but I got to a point where I just didn't really want to. I wanted to be by myself more than often. And I didn't think it was depression.
Nah.
You know what I'm saying? And I also just I wasn't motivated like I usually would be. I didn't really have an interest to do much of anything. My mind was always running with the what ifs and stuff like that. And I started to realize what made me really want to make a change, not only me just identifying it, but I started to realize, well, if I'm around certain people, people can feel that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And I don't want to be that friend to where you'd be like, man, I don't feel like going around them. They you know what I'm saying? That energy just a little off all the time.
Yeah.
I didn't want to be that friend. And so I started just basically take action and like, man, I got to be real with myself that this is just what it is, you know? And I had to also know that I wasn't the only one going through it. You know, like you said, a lot of people don't talk about it. You have a lot of friends, a lot of my friends who now, when I create those spaces of let's have a conversation about this, how you feel about that, and they open up and I'm like, well, why you never saying that? And they're like, well, what you gonna do? Or what is anybody gonna do about it? But maybe talking will help you. And maybe it is something I can recommend that might help, you know, because, you know, or maybe I'm going through it too, and we can figure this out together. You know what I'm saying?
100%.
So it is definitely hard, especially I know, and I'm pretty sure for women too, but I know my experience as a man, it's definitely hard because as a black man in America, and I'm pretty sure anywhere else, um, culturally, we have they expect for you to walk a certain type of way, talk a certain type of way. You got to be in a certain type of things. You have to be a part of a certain bracket financially to be even considered a man. And sometimes people don't really understand the pressure of that
Oh yeah.
as a man. And that's just not the outside community. That's even within our community, we have to deal with those type of thoughts. So a lot of times you see us, you know, we find ourselves in situations where we get into trouble, we get into a lot of things because we don't know how to balance that. We don't know how to have a conversation, or even as adults, we don't even know how to articulate
Yeah.
how we feel. We just think that's just how it is. A lot of times what I see when it comes to black men, we like to correlate aggression with masculinity.
Mm.
And we don't have to be that way. we don't have to be that. Being aggressive does not just mean that you're a man. It could just mean psychologically, it's some things that you still need to figure out. You know what I'm saying?
It could possibly mean you don't know how to effectively navigate your emotions.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
you come out in only one way.
Yeah.
I mean,
which could be
that.
it's kind of childish, when you think about it, and I had to realize that even within myself. I always felt like, well, it was a time where I felt, if you try me like this, I'm gonna have to do something to you, but I had to realize that I don't need that, because sometimes it's just not about me. Sometimes the reaction that people want on you, you don't have to give it to it. And it ain't even about them. It's just about you. You know what I'm saying? Make sure you in a good space. Just because you ain't in a good space, I don't have to deal with that, because I can get myself up out of this. I can walk away from this. And it does not make you less of a man, and it does not make you less of a woman. But we definitely need more people who are advocating for programs like this. Fortunately, now we live in an era now where people, I can't say that's the plus side of social media. Okay. It helps you be able to expand your platforms when it comes to these type of programs. Like even with dealing with children, especially, a lot of times we forget that they go through it too. So that's pretty cool that y'all are doing this. So with working with children, how long have you been doing this program with children?
So with SSA, we've been around since 2022.
Okay.
And then I've been doing this work in the mental health space since 2016.
Okay.
So it's been some time that I've been working with youth and young adults in the mental health space, but the nonprofit is fairly new. And you said a couple of things about knowing how to articulate and then your feelings, and how we typically associate those quote negative feelings with being negative. Right. So we have one of our events programs that we run is called It's Okay to Not Be Okay. So that happens every single month. And in the title alone, we hope to encourage people to be okay with all of the emotions that we as human beings experience. And sometimes that's being sad. Sometimes that's grief. Because just because it's quote negative, it doesn't mean that we have to suppress those things.
Right.
It means that we need to learn how to experience those things in ways that are effective.
Yeah.
Because if you just lost someone that you love and you're going around living life excited and happy and not experiencing that thing, that does something to you psychologically.
Oh yeah.
And I think it's important, to be able to recognize, when I'm feeling happy, like that's great. When I'm feeling sad, that's okay.
Yeah.
When I'm feeling down or, feelings of depression, that's okay too.
Yeah.
Right. How do we have those conversations versus running from those feelings and not allowing ourselves to feel the full scope of what it means to be a human being? You said something also that had to do with relationships. And I read this book a few years ago. It was recommended by a mentor of mine, and it changed my life, because growing up in the household I grew up in, I was a pastor's kid. So my dad's a pastor. Also, like I mentioned, grew up raised by Jamaican immigrants. And so there are certain things that happen in our house that is just very unique to our situation. And I learned very early how to be a people pleaser. And so I was saying yes to things without even thinking about what it meant to say yes.
Mhm.
And that does something to you mentally and emotionally, especially if that's habitual. If you're no
Mhm.
longer thinking about the fact that, oh, I just said yes to this and this and this, and I didn't want to, or I don't have the capacity to, or that's not something that I'm skilled at doing. I'm not the right person for that thing. So um, I grew up, and that became a habit. That became something that was just second nature for me. And I read this book. It's called The Disease to Please. And as I'm reading the book, I'm reading myself in these pages and why I feel the need to please everyone and why it's so important for me to put everyone and everything before myself.
Mm.
And not only was it, making me aware of these things, but it's giving me practical tips on how to assess my own emotions, right? Being able to ask myself, okay, this person just requested this of me. Do I have the emotional capacity to even do this thing?
Mm.
And sometimes the answer is no, and that's okay. So I think, as we navigate relationships too, I think it's important to know that the way we do that affects our mental health.
Yeah.
And if we have people in our lives that look up to us, whether it's a child that you have, a mentee that you have, maybe you are the leader of an organization and you lead people, your inability to navigate your own mental health and your inability to operate in a healthy way affects everyone else
Yeah.
that looks up to you in any capacity. So I think it's our responsibility to make sure we're healthy, and then understanding that us making sure that we're healthy will then trickle down into the relationships that we have,
Mhm.
because sometimes it's necessary to end relationships,
Yeah.
and that's 100% a good thing.
Yeah.
And if there are any feelings and emotions that come up that are difficult to navigate while we're ending this relationship, maybe that's worth exploring. But it doesn't mean that we should keep the relationship if it's not an effective relationship, especially for where we're going. We're talking about growth and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think, thinking about relationships, thinking about our own mental health and all of these different things, what we're aiming to do is equip this younger generation. There's a large, and I don't have the percentage right now, but a large percentage of Black youth who die by suicide these
Mhm.
days. Um, and I think because I know suicide is the most preventable death, I think we're doing a bad job of equipping the youth with the skills that they need so that when they're experiencing these emotions, feelings, things that feel overwhelming that lead them to believe that, well, ending it is the best option. I think we need to take responsibility for that and say, what can we do so that they have the necessary tools? And sometimes that what can we do is working on ourselves,
Yeah.
because they're going to see that and model that just like they have been modeling the opposite of it.
Yeah. Yeah. I do want to hit on what you said about grief, right? I know for a lot of us, no matter the age, grief is something kind of hard to navigate through. I remember watching when Mary had the show out. I remember when was it Tina husband cheated on her, I think. She was, of course, very emotional, very upset about it. And it was like, well, trust God is going to do it. And she was like, I don't want to listen to that right now. And sometimes you have to be open to feeling how you feeling so you can understand how you feel to navigate through it so you won't have to feel like that
Mm,
again. And I think a lot of times we would tell people when we're in the grief process, and when I say grief, I'm not necessarily just talking about death. Um, as far as human form, I'm speaking as it could be the death of a situation, a job,
mm,
anything. But we have to allow ourselves to feel that, not so we can just lay in it, but so we can understand it and understand how not to get back to that point again
mhm,
and find ways of effectiveness of how not to get back to that point again. And a lot of times we tell our people when they're going through stuff, it's gonna be okay, it's gonna be all right. Um, the thing is, sometimes that's not what they need to hear.
Mhm.
You know, so sometimes we have to allow people to
Mhm.
grieve. It's okay to cry.
Mhm.
You know, it's okay for you to feel how you feeling, but we're not gonna lay here and next we're gonna see what we do next about it. You know, and I think a lot of times when we come into these situations, we don't have that. We don't have people around us to say, okay, well, what can we do next? Your support system, your friends aren't just around to make you laugh.
Yeah.
Okay. And if that's the only thing your friend got to offer, you don't need to be around your friend. If your friend is not holding you accountable, if your friend is not assisting you with the progression of your life, you don't need, that's not your friend.
Mhm.
This is just the buddy that I'm gonna laugh with, you know. So you, with healing, the people that you bring around you is very, very important,
Mhm.
you know.
Mhm.
And I one thing I stick to the same set of friends that I've had since high school, which
Mhm.
is a handful of people, and because I don't take the word friend very light, and I'll even look at them as family.
Mhm.
But with that, we have to have the conversations because when our friends ain't doing what they're supposed to do, we have to be open about that too,
Yeah.
you know. And but with it, like you said, it all requires working on yourself. When you identify
Yeah.
certain things within yourself, you definitely have to work on it because now you know.
Now you know, and
Now
you
you know.
can't unknow.
Yeah.
And to the point of the person who is saying, "Oh, it's gonna be okay. You'll get over it," or
Mhm,
we'll pray with you, and
mhm,
you'll be all set.
hmm,
Typically, that's the person who does not allow themselves to
mhm,
feel those feelings of being, betrayed, being hurt, being in pain, grieving.
mhm.
And so, because they don't give themselves the opportunity to, it's uncomfortable to even create a space or be in a space for someone who needs that in that moment. And you mentioned, biblically and what it looks like around grief. And, there are multiple examples that we can look at where grief is welcomed
Mhm.
and grieving is a part of the process,
Yeah.
right? In so many different forms. And so I think when we allow ourselves to recognize that this is no longer taking us forward,
Mhm.
because maybe there was a time in our history where we had to suck it up and keep going,
Yeah.
right? But we in a different, situation,
Yeah.
right? So I think it's important to know that we in a different situation, and that same thing that worked for us then is no longer working for us. And it's okay to drop that
Yeah.
and start feeling our feelings and
Yeah.
feeling our emotions. I'm not gonna lie to you, like that has been a challenge for me, feeling my feelings, feeling my emotions. And it wasn't until I got married where I started to realize I got some work to do,
Mhm.
because I was the person who was uncomfortable when my wife was emotional. I didn't know what to do with that. I didn't know how to, hold her, and I would do it, but it was so weird. Like it was like
Yeah.
I don't know how to
Yeah.
navigate this. And then I started, in therapy again. I've done therapy for, multiple times since that first time in college,
Mhm.
because the more you work on yourself, the more you realize that there's more work to do.
Yeah.
So things start to come up, and I'm like, okay, I need to go back because I need to work on this.
Yeah.
And I remember going back into therapy, and I was working on something specific as it related to my inability to feel all of the emotions that I experienced as a human being. And it was a challenge. And so if I think that, I'm 28 years old now, it took me 26 to 28 years to develop this habit of suppressing my emotions. I got to give myself some time,
Mhm.
and I got to be willing to put in the work
Mhm.
to be able to reverse, like unlearn some of those things that, I developed, and then, relearn something that's more effective for the purpose of moving forward.
Yes.
If I was not married, maybe I wouldn't have the motivation
Mhm.
to develop my emotional agility.
Mhm.
But because I want to be in a blissful, amazing relationship with somebody that I know is here forever, and we're going to grow together, I am going to do the necessary work. And if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be doing the work. If I
Right.
didn't have the desire for growth, if I didn't see that there was a possibility of being able to navigate your emotions in healthy ways, I probably wouldn't have something to strive for.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of pieces to it, but it starts with ourselves,
Mhm.
starts with us coming back to the drawing board and looking at, what I've known in the past. It got me to this point. Now,
Hmm.
am I okay with where I am now, or do I want to level up? And if I need to level up, I have to be willing to do something different.
Yeah. Yeah. Mm. Then so y'all have the summit coming up,
Yep.
2019. Tell us about the summit.
Yeah, so I'm excited. This is the first year of the summit. It's an annual event.
Okay.
So this is the first time that we will ever have the first of it, and it's going to be the smallest we've ever had.
Mm.
So we're expecting about 300 people, 200 teenagers from across the Panhandle, Okaloosa County, Santa Rosa County, Escambia County. It's going to be July 19th from 9 to 2. We have not only the founder of the suicide hotline who's flying out to speak to the teens, but we also have trained youth storytellers that will be doing keynote presentations at the summit. We have a series of breakout sessions that we'll be facilitating. The theme of the summit is express yourself, right? So we have through the breakout sessions, multiple creative ways to express yourself. So through art, through music, through performing arts, through movement. And we have a bunch of individuals, leaders in our community that's going to be facilitating these workshops. And then we have some of y'all may be familiar with BAM Snowballs. So we have free snowballs throughout the event. We got free food from Sonny's. We have a bunch of nice giveaways that businesses and companies and organizations have donated to raffle off at the event. We still have opportunities for people to volunteer. We need support on the day of and the day before as far as the layout of the entire event. And then opportunities for sponsors. We still have a couple of slots available if there are businesses that want to showcase what they have, products and services to teenagers. It is for teens 13 to 18 years old. Registration is live. It has been live for about a week now. And so we have, once we sell the 200 tickets, that's it. Right. So there's no more spots available. And everything, you can learn everything about the summit at ssasummit.org. And then obviously you can reach out to me, Abraham Scully, and I can share information. I can sit down with you, share opportunities where we can partner as a community. But I'm excited because I think this is going to be the first time the teenagers in our community and, in the Panhandle get an opportunity to realize that they matter, right? And we want to hear their stories. We want to not only hear their stories, but we want to equip them with this space where it's safe enough to connect with like-minded peers and connect with resources that can help to elevate you, right? So the name of the nonprofit is Storytelling Solutions of America. And essentially, we will get to a point where we have trained youth storytellers all throughout the country and given them platforms to share their stories and bring resources to different communities through public speaking, whether it's going out, doing presentations, coming on podcasts, sharing their stories, being in different boardrooms, advocating for resources that are necessary, because I believe that, this generation, right, they're different, bro. Like,
most definitely.
I see the things that they're okay with talking about, and how they have courage to do things that typically, we weren't doing years ago. And right now they just need guidance. They just need, the tools, they need the resources. And from there, just let them go. And I'm excited to see what happens, at the end of it. So like I said, it's our first annual event. We're looking forward to really good turnout. There are a lot of people behind this event to make sure it is a success. So I have a very amazing team of individuals, and we're excited. So,
and that's pretty. Well, first of all, what's the location?
So it's going to be Gateway Church.
Okay,
Gateway Church on Creighton Road. And yep.
That's pretty. I mean, I'm excited about it. I'm definitely going to be in attendance, and I'm pretty sure the Real Women Radio family will be there as well. It's definitely something that's needed in our communities because, like you said, we're coming up with a different generation of people, and they have the courage to say and do a lot of things that we didn't when we were younger. And the thing is, it's not a bad thing.
No,
it's just gearing them to do it in a more positive and effective way.
Correct.
Because we live in an area now where we have the man, people can go on social media and get famous just off of TikTok. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm talking about kids making money off of YouTube and TikTok. Okay. We had to sneak getting on social media back in the day. Okay. So I mean, even with my nephew, you know, I watch my nephews and a lot of the things they are into, and I'm just kind of like, man, we couldn't do that. We didn't have this growing up. And a lot of times the people who are still kind of set back into that old way of thinking will make you feel like it's just all negative. It ain't gonna do them no good. It ain't gonna do this. But I'm like, no, that's just the generation we coming into now. How can we make it positive? You know what I'm saying? Of course, that's anything we use, we can make turn into a negative, you know. But how can we make this positive? Or how can we make this not only positive but lucrative for the families to come?
Mhm.
You know, because the things that we do now is supposed to be for the generation to come, you
Mhm.
know. And we need these type of platforms to help spread the word with that. I know, man, we see kids, we come into a generation of kids who are definitely entrepreneurs.
Oh yeah, I love it.
Yeah. And they'll tell you, I don't want to work with nobody. You know what I'm saying? This
Yeah.
is what I want to do, you know, and I get it 100%. Yeah, but a lot of times, I think it's very important to have business coaches,
Yes.
life coaches. A lot of times they don't have the access to them in a lot of communities, or they don't know. And a lot of times you have them around them, but you know, either they can't afford them, or you don't have people who can say, hey, well, you come over here. You know what I'm saying? We can hook you up with this person. We don't have people doing it. You in a lot of spaces you have a lot of gatekeeping, and fortunately we do have people. We have, you know, people like you. We have people like Antonio Ruster who
That's my
are
guy.
getting it. Yeah, Tone, man. We call him Tone. You know what I'm saying? Tone, definitely. We have people like Nicole Dixon, Erica Lane.
Yeah. Yeah.
We have those type of people who are going into communities and are saying, okay, y'all can't come here, we'll go out there and get you, you know. um because a lot of times too, due to mental health of a lot of our youth, their self-esteem isn't what you would think it would be,
Mm.
you know. So a lot of times they don't even know how to approach people with telling you what they want, you know, or how to get it. And then sometimes, you know, even their parents never had it, you know. We get into it, and like, you know, a lot of us are first generation when it comes to college, you know what I'm saying? And just imagine now we didn't just go through that, you know.
Yeah.
You go to the projects, a lot of those kids don't have their parents who didn't even finish high school, you know. And I was even looking at, I'm big, if you know me, I'm big on ancestry. And I was looking at a lot of my earlier grandparents when they came along, and most of the time they finished school in third grade, never went to school after
Wow.
that, had 12, 13 kids. You know what I'm saying? And never finished school. And we thought grandma was the smartest thing
Yeah.
smoking, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, she was.
Yeah, you know. But you know, we thought that, but they never told us about the struggle, you know, something that they had, or the things that they still probably struggle with until the day that they died. So we can make life easy. And a lot of times people are like, oh, well, you're making a kid a punk. That's what a lot of people say.
Mhm.
Why would we want our kids' life to be easy? Why would you want your child to struggle? I remember, especially if you local, we knew that a lot of the kids that went to Booker T. Washington High School were more well-off Black children. A lot of their parents were lawyers. Some of them were even judges. And so they dressed nice. They lived in really nice communities. And for the kids who went to the predominantly Black schools, when we would see these kids, we would be like, oh, well, you know, she thinks she better than this, and thinking, and I was like, we was raised as haters at a young age, you know what I'm saying? But as a parent,
That is very true. That's
yeah,
crazy. Yeah.
yeah, you know what I'm saying? But as a parent, that parent was doing what they were supposed to be doing. You're supposed to make sure your kids look
Yeah.
nice. You're supposed to make sure that your kids get
Wow.
the best, you know what I'm saying, education that you
Wow.
think that they could possibly have,
Yeah.
you know. But mentally, a lot of kids, like I said, we inherit things that we don't even realize sometimes, you know. So it's very important that, you know, we have those programs like we have right now.
You
Like that.
mentioned something about coaching and
Mhm.
being able to have the guidance. And one of the reasons why I knew that a program like this would be successful is because I'm a product of it.
Mhm.
So I mentioned about my story with depression in college.
Mhm.
I had no idea that my story meant anything besides this was my experience. And it wasn't until I got invited to speak at a church one time. It was back, back at my home church. And I remember, they reached out to me, was like, man, we see you, doing stuff on social media. We want to come and have you speak at our youth day. How much do you charge? And I was like, how much do you charge? What you mean, how much do I charge?
Yeah.
I just speak because I got something to say.
Yeah.
And I think it'll help people. And that conversation shifted my perspective forever, because going back to, just young people being entrepreneurs these days, fast forward however much, since 2016 that I've been speaking, I have not only done work with MTV, with a documentary, I've done work with national organizations, I've done work with schools all over the country. I travel for a living and speak and share my story, and I get paid to do it.
Mhm.
So, one of the things that we're hoping to do through the organization is show teenagers at a young age different ways that they can be lucrative and creative with their own stories, and how their own stories can open doors and create opportunities for themselves.
Mm.
And what would it look like if someone who thought for majority of their lives that, they were at a deficit because of the things that they experienced, now shift to realizing that this actually empowers me. The fact that I went through these things is a benefit, and I have a new perspective. And not only do I have a new perspective, but people want to hear it. People need to hear it.
Mhm.
People will pay to hear it.
Mhm.
You know what I'm saying? That's a whole nother perspective.
Yeah.
And so that's one of the things that we're doing. Like I mentioned, we're training youth storytellers now, right? They will be our keynote speakers, at this summit. They're getting paid to speak. You know what I'm saying? So it's like they're getting to see how that same thing that they thought was detrimental and had no significance, had no value in their lives, that someone wants to hear it, right? And when you have the skill of communication, right, you can go anywhere. You could do whatever you want to do. And that's important, because we didn't know that, in 2014, 2015, when I went through my experience and someone asked me how much, do you charge to speak? I didn't know that was a thing.
Yeah.
I'm sitting there
Yeah.
like, you gonna pay me to do this thing that I was willing to just do whatever.
Yeah.
And so imagine if they know that, right? Maybe that's something that they could pursue. It may be something that they pursue full time, or it may be something that they do on the side because they know I have a story to tell, and this story is needed in certain places, and people will bring me to share this thing. Then why not share that? That's an opportunity as well.
Right. Man. I really appreciate you for coming in up on us today, man. We definitely, like I told y'all before, if you're looking for more information when it comes to the event on July 19th, you can definitely find it on the G Spot Podcast page, man. And where could they find you if they want to just hit you up directly?
Yeah, so Storytelling Solutions on all social media platforms is the name of the organization. Storytelling Solutions, or Storytelling Solutions of America. The site for the summit is just ssasummit.org. And then from there, it has all our social media as well.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, man. I appreciate you again for coming with us again. We're going to definitely have to get you on the show. Definitely for that man's conversation. We're going to definitely do that, man. If y'all haven't already, make sure y'all download the RWR Live 365 app. Like I said, where you can listen to this show and many other good shows and some good music all day long. Shout out to my girl Nicole and Q Lala for helping us put this thing together. And too, I definitely want to give a big shout out and a thank you to Justina for connecting us together. Her and Tone, man, I appreciate y'all, man. That really meant a lot to me when y'all be sitting people up over here. And make sure, man, they got plenty. I think Sundress and Sangria coming up soon too. So make sure y'all check that out if you're in the Pensacola area next month, if I'm not mistaken. I think it's next month. Yeah, I'll see it on my page, man. Sundress Sangria. That was my first event that I went through for Justina them. And when I tell you, that was the best part I ever went to in Pensacola.
Wow.
Yeah, that was the best part I ever went to.
They don't play.
They don't play.
Excellent.
Grown folk stuff.
I love it.
So many people there. So many good looking people there, man. And it wasn't too crowded. That was the good thing about it. When you get too many black people in the room, get real hot. But it was still, it was a very good experience, man. So make sure y'all check out our next Sundress and Sangria. And y'all be safe tonight, man. Make sure y'all always check us out each and every Thursday night, 8 p.m. Central Time.